Hello, 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 you beautiful savages. Welcome into another episode of Fully Unscripted. We got a lot to talk about today, including post-Tua hit era of the NFL. We'll dive into that as we saw two pretty bad roughing the passer, if you want to call that, penalties this Sunday and last night in the Monday night game. We'll also get a reaction from the Kentucky-South Carolina game this past Saturday. It was actually, a kind of disappointing weekend all around. I gave $25 to Todd at the horse track, and I said, hey, Todd, you might know this stuff better than I do with horse racing. Go bet on a horse for me. And I think that horse ended up coming like fourth to last. So, I guess I can't count on Todd to.
It was a 7-horse race.
And he came like fourth to last. I think there was like 8 or 9 horses in that one, actually.
I think there were 7, but I'll look it back up.
Okay, cool. Well, hopefully we have some better luck this weekend. Hopefully the Cats have some better luck this weekend against Mississippi State. Hopefully the Packers can bounce back after an embarrassing loss in England to the, I wouldn't say hot or cold, but just kind of like, New York Giants. We'll also have senior columnist from Saturday Down South, Saturday Tradition, and the host of the Saturday Down South podcast, Connor O'Gara, going to come in. We'll talk about what happened this Saturday with UK South Carolina. We'll preview Mississippi State. And we'll also ask some questions around the SEC, including a top 10 matchup coming in this week against Tennessee and Alabama. Also get his reactions against Alabama and Texas A&M. So this podcast shall begin right about now. What's going on, fellas? How we doing?
Good, baby. How we doing?
Oh, man, I'm feeling electric. I got my turkey and rice in me. Had a great workout this morning. Also, I'm running on about probably 400 or 500 milligrams of caffeine right now, so we're actually...
You know what happened last time you did that?
Well, that last time was like 800. This time's around 500, so...
Fair enough.
I think we'll be all right. But let's kind of start off. Let's just kind of get our reactions this week from the Kentucky game, and then we'll get into the fiasco of that Monday night game last night. Actually, not a fiasco. The fiasco was the calling part of that game, the referees, especially with that roughing the passer call. But obviously a disappointing week this week here at Commonwealth Stadium for the Cats. They had Shane Bieber come in South Carolina get his first road win in over a year. And over the past like 5 or 6 years, we've actually been pretty good against South Carolina. I believe I've only lost to them one time in my career. And I think they've lost to them maybe one more time after that. But obviously Will Levis was out. It was determined to be a turf toe injury, which absolutely hurts like hell. From what I've heard, obviously, with it being especially in your big toe, you need your big toe for a lot of things, especially to walk. Did you actually guys know you couldn't actually walk? Like literally can't walk without your big toe? That is I never knew that until like this week.
It's wild.
That's crazy. But like for people who don't know what turf toe is, because I actually told a lot of people this when I finally found out the news, and they're like, well, what's turf toe? And I'm like, well, essentially what it is the skin that's underneath your toenail actually just rips. So, just splits right up the seam there. And it's probably one of the more painful injuries in sports, one of the more painful injuries, not just in sports, but entirety of injuries. But, and it was so many speculations of what it could be. Could it be a finger? Could it be a concussion? Could it be a shoulder? This, or that? And so shout out to Mark Stoops and the PR team over there at UK for keeping things under wraps until it absolutely needed to come out because you know how people are if you give out injury updates too early into the week. And then next thing you know, they're creating different speculations here and there. But it's kind of a rough week for the Cats. They came out with their second string quarterback. What's his name?
Kai Sharon.
Kai Sharon. I should know that. And buddy, I apologize. He's from Somerset, probably one of the number 4 pocket passers in the nation coming out of high school. Having your first start be in the SEC against South Carolina and having to replace a guy like Will Levis on such a short notice probably has to be one of the more nerve-wracking things that could probably come about with your young career. But I think he ended up going 17 for 24 with over 178 yards passing. He had a couple touchdowns, one to Barryon Brown. He also had an interception. But one thing I want to talk about first real quick, and then we'll get more into this as we get into with Connor, but what was your all's thought of the first play from scrimmage with kind of the trickery and, kind of having a double reverse, but and didn't work out too well? What were your guys' thoughts on that?
Take it away, Zach.
I felt that that's not how they should have came out and started the game. South Carolina had one of the worst rushing defenses in the SEC, and I don't see how you don't come out and give it to your, workhorse of a back to see how it's going to if their defense is going to play as bad as they had been.
Especially when we're still trying to get him going.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Especially for Kai Sharon, like to just hand it off, get the chains moved. I mean, I get if you let Barryon Brown break that, how big it is, but first play, man, hand it to Chris and see what's going to happen.
Yeah, they should have handed it off first first and foremost, just because, I mean, like you said, one of the worst rush defenses in the SEC, and you got one of the biggest workhorses in the SEC back there at running back. Ended up having 22 carries for over 150 yards. So, well, not over 150, over 120 yards. So, welcome back, C-Rod. Welcome back, 24. And so, even with one of the worst offensive lines, not only in the SEC, but in college football, in my opinion, like I said last week, you give Chris Rodriguez, an inch, he'll take a mile. And so, he's always falling forward for those extra yards. And so, seeing him come out and have over a 100-yard game, is, I would say, probably one of the more encouraging things about this week. Other than that, and it was kind of disappointing. But going back to the first play, though, here's the thing. You have to create a spark. You have to create momentum early in the game. And I can remember, with teams that would come in or teams that we were playing that, that I felt like didn't have a good chance of winning straight up against us, like line it up and run the football or just line up and play your normal offense. You would see kind of those, trick and dink plays, early on, but I've never seen one right out of the gate. You're kind of always expecting that, and I think that Shane Beamer kind of knew that coming in, knowing that Kentucky needed that spark to get them going. But when I look back at the film, to be quite honest with you, would I call that? No. I'd be calling straight 24 dive with, 24 back there in the backfield. But, if we get that block on the edge, in the boundary, I mean, the field looked wide open on the backside. So, I mean, we're saying this now as in it was a bad play call, but
it worked.
If it would have worked, we'd have been like, oh, this is the greatest damn call of all
We're going to
time.
have a follow-up conversation about the way that, if it goes right, you're a genius. If it goes wrong, you're a fool.
Oh, you're an idiot.
With all these 2-point conversion talks for Monday Night Football.
At the end of the day, you look at so many things, and that's always a conversation. If it worked, you're like, man, Rich is a genius. What a way to come out. And then that happens, you're like, what an idiot. I mean, it's just – It's hard to look at.
Yeah. I mean, you said something to me, during the game though. I guess it was right after. I guess it was the day after the game, Sunday, where you and I just our daily banter. I just don't want to see this be the domino. I don't want to see a backslide, and I think that's going to be on this week of practice how they respond. As a unit, obviously, health concerns with Will and everything else, but. For me, you don't want to look back on this and it be that teetering point that caused us to start to slip backwards from everything we've been building.
Yeah, I can swallow the lost Ole Miss, like all the stuff that happened. Like I still felt like we should have won. You felt like the better team coming out of that. You just had some stuff go wrong.
Yes.
Saturday, we got beat in so many different areas that wasn't our fault. Right? Like they were just the aggressor. They were better in so many areas.
They smelled blood in the water.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing, I just don't have a lot of faith in our OC right now, right? Like you have your back goes for 16 carries, 97 yards in the first half, and he gets 2 carries in the third quarter. I don't know. It's just hard for me to have faith right now in that.
And it seemed like in the first half too, we wanted to get the offense going, want to get momentum going. We had Kai Sharon back there, and at first it kind of looked like they were kind of handcuffing him for, a brief moment with, screens and handoffs, different things like that. And I understand with it being your first start, you don't want to overwhelm, a young quarterback like that, but toward the end there, they started letting the chains loose a little bit, and you could see what the kid could do moving the ball down the field. And so, my question moving forward is that, will this be, God forbid we have to get in this situation again, but if we do have to get in this situation again, obviously we've seen that on Monday that Will Levis has been named the starter on the depth chart. We don't know for sure. He was named the starter last week as well, so we have no idea what's going to happen until Mississippi State comes to town. We'll have more from Connor when he gets on here to talk with us in about 20, 30 minutes. But, having a guy also on the other side of the ball like Jaquez Jones down hurts you bad. I know that the inside linebacker group is probably one of the deeper position groups on that defense, if not the whole team. But when you have a guy like Jaquez who's made play after play after play from sideline to sideline, making interception after interception for you, having a guy out there like that, really sets a precedent for your defense. And so when he's not out there, you can definitely tell. But actually, let's go ahead and move on down to the NFL talk. One of the games really the only game I really want to talk about is last night's Monday Night Football game against the Kansas City Chiefs and the Las Vegas Raiders. Probably one of the more entertaining Monday Night Football games we've had so far this season. Obviously, the Raiders went up 17-0 early in the first quarter, early in the first half. They got shut out for a 3-and-out on their first drive and then continued to score with their next 3 possessions. You had a guy like Josh Jacobs who had a career high of 157 yards on the ground, and also Devontae Adams with 2 touchdowns and 124 yards receiving. he seemed like he was pissed off about something after the game. I don't know what it might have been.
So,
but.
all right, I was literally sitting here thinking, where do we start? I don't want to start at the end with that collision.
Oh no, we're talking about the game first.
I know, but I'm saying the collision at the end of the game that kind of set him off to feel that
I'm
way.
glad you said that, because Golden Tate, I saw a tweet that he had today, was talking about how that in that particular passing route, Devontae is supposed to release outside and get upfield.
So he made the mistake.
From per Golden Tate, I'm not saying it.
So what I saw, again, we can go back and forth on how much schematics I can speak on offenses from football, but I did look into it a little bit. Heard what Troy Aikman had to say after the game and Joe Buck, and they both said, or Troy I guess said that it looked like Devontae got jammed up, by the defender right off the line and didn't get released as quickly as he should have.
Right.
And that Spencer is supposed to come behind him.
Mm-hmm.
And so because he got jammed up and was slowed down at the start of that route, threw the timing off, and they ran into each other. So where my immediate reaction when we saw it was that he was frustrated with Renfro for running into him. But Renfro apparently, from what I can tell, did his job properly, and he should have been cleared out by then.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said before, like when after I saw Golden Tate's tweet and I went back and looked at it, obviously, like you said, he did get jammed up pretty good at the line of scrimmage. But if you're an all-pro receiver like Devontae Adams, and you're getting paid this buku amount of money, and you are the top dog in the NFL, no matter if you get jammed this way or that way, you've got to find a way to get releasing outside the way you're supposed to be running this route. And so, like I said, we're not offense coordinators. We're not wide receivers coaches. I'm just going off what I see off the internet. Like I said, I'm just some dumb fuck that reads Twitter all the time. So I could see how that could, prompt Devontae Adams being pissed off about the game, and then,
well, he also
decleating that camera.
He also had a drop that he doesn't normally have. He had the play on the outside, right? That he's smarter than that. Just a couple knick-knack things, but that's the way that the Raiders have. I mean, they're 1-4, and Derek Carr said in postgame they should be 5-0, or very easily could be 5-0. They have a 5-point differential in those 4 losses.
And that's the thing, dude. Football is literally
insane.
A game of
inches. It's literally. I mean, it's one play, right? Like you can go pick it apart. We can pick apart the incomplete pass down the sideline. We can pick apart the 2-point conversion try. We can pick apart all those things. But really, it only takes one of those to go right.
Right.
Because over the course of a 60-minute ball game, how many of those things can add up? And it's not like the Chiefs didn't make mistakes in their own right. So. It's easy to look at that one mistake, that one route run, that one, not being able to pinch it on the sideline and make that catch. Any of those decisions, the knee going down on the 2-point conversion, like all those things can be the single reason that the ball game didn't go their way. But in general, it comes down to literally a game of inches. One of those plays has to go right, and they win that game.
Absolutely. Just like we were talking about last week with, there's so many things that go on in between the lines of a football game that you really can't pinpoint one play that lost you the game or won you the game.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many collective factors in that group to where, like you were saying, there was 5 plays there. If one of those worked or one of those converted, you're looking at a totally different ball game.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows? But, we talked about the Raiders here for a little bit. Let's actually talk about how Patrick Mahomes looked like he was in MVP form last night.
His ability, I think it was Troy Aikman as well that made this comment during the game, that he's becoming an offensive coordinator in his own right. Actually, it was Joe Buck that said it. He's becoming an offensive coordinator in his own right. There was a couple times where he saw something and he grabs a guy, under the shoulder pads and gets in his face, not in an aggressive way, but like in an educational way. He's out there pointing and everything in between plays. And, I still look at him like he's super young, but he's a vet.
He's a vet
in the league now.
Absolutely.
And he's kind of coming into his form as, many of the greats did, Peyton and Tom and all those guys. I call them by their first name because, we're that close, but
so close.
They have to eventually make that transition where they grab the reins themselves and start to kind of take over on that offensive coordinator role. And watching him and what they do, there's nobody else in the league that plays like the Chiefs do. It's just so different and dynamic, and they throw in all these. I mean, some of the play options where Patrick's rolling out and deciding whether to throw or not. He had like a 9-yard gain on some random third down that I just remember watching him being like, nobody else runs plays that way. Like nobody else gives the quarterback the ability to be as creative as they want in that situation.
It's scripted schoolyard ball. for them.
I was literally about to say that.
It's scripted schoolyard ball.
Especially
good.
what
I
you
like
saw
that.
last year in that playoff game when Travis Kelce came off to the side and was telling him, like, hey, I obviously I can't remember exactly what he was talking about. It was something to do with the coverage and how the safeties rotate. And he says, hey, if he stays, I'm just going to run straight down the seam.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I call that? That is football IQ out the ass.
Yep.
And I mean, that is one of the more beautiful things to watch, is knowing that the player, even though he's in this crazy, hostile environment with so many things going on, that he is able to look at the bigger picture and say, okay, oh, this guy's staying here on this play, but he's actually rotating when we, maybe motion a guy or keep a guy in back. And, I think that's really one of the reasons why Travis Kelce had 4 touchdowns last night, leading into Dog of the Week, our new segment right here on – let me do that again. Cut that, Brandon. Leading into our Dog of the Week, Travis Kelce. 4 tutties on his birthday.
The fact that you texted us, like, that didn't even need to be said. You texted us last night and you were like, this is my pick for Dog of the Week.
Dog of the Week. No doubt.
Unquestionable Dog of the Week. 4 touchdowns on, get this, I don't know if y'all saw this stat, 4 touchdowns on 25 yards.
25 yards, 7 receptions. Yeah. He is the 4th tight end in NFL history to only have 4 touchdowns in the game, and he's the first to do it since 1985.
That's nuts. That's like that stat that you and I love of Klay Thompson's, where he scored whatever it was, 50-something points on like 11 dribbles.
11 dribbles. He scored his 60 points.
Have you seen that? Do you remember that game at all in the playoffs?
I just know the stats of Game 6 Klay. That's the only stats I know.
I think this was, what game was that? I don't remember. But he scored.
I think it was regular season, but he scored 50-some points. It might have been 60.
On 11
dribbles.
Like just all catch and shoot,
all coming off
screens
and stuff.
Everything.
But I mean, just 11 dribbles.
In a similar way, like some of the, again, admittedly don't know football schematics as well as I should, but some of the plays, back to your scripted schoolyard football that the Chiefs run, like they're using these routes of everybody else in the receiving core to, take defenders out of the way for Travis to get open. And watching it back, like trying to learn what I'm looking for after talking, with you and knowing what a defense is after and everything else, it's fascinating. Like that one, I think it was his 3rd touchdown. He starts to go, outside towards the back of the end zone, then cuts back in over the middle because he knew that linebacker wasn't going to be able to cover that area anymore. Well, that stuff is fascinating to me because they're so good at it. And I don't see it in real time. So I have to go back and watch it and be like, now what did they do here?
In my eyes, the Chiefs last year had the 3 best schoolyard players in the game, right? Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, and Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill's go because whenever a play went array, but I mean, those were the guys, right?
Tyreek's just running figure eights
and then
out there.
Kelce knows exactly where to go. Now it's just Kelce. I mean, he's going to get all those touchdowns because he plays the phenomenal schoolyard ball.
Mm-hmm. I feel like sometimes, actually, when they come off on the sideline, Travis comes back, hey, I'm just going to run around. You run around. I'll get open. Just find me. I'll be good.
Well, I mean, the fact that the line does such a good job to give Patrick Mahomes time, probably doesn't get enough credit, because the only way that Tyreek last year and Travis last year and this year is able to do that and have the time to be able to get free, and Patrick have the time to be able to find them, is because that offensive line's given him such a solid pocket to work with, and the fact that he can scramble with his eyes closed and just still.
Well, the one play that he made that literally just about made me jump up out of my bed when I was watching that game last night, the pocket collapses. It looks like he's about to get sacked 2 or 3 times. And literally a defender's like coming underneath his throwing arm, and you see him like rotate the ball up to try to get it over his head. But as he's coming up, he actually dumps it off and gets a first down. It was one of the more crazy. And I mean, at this point now, you're looking at Patrick Mahomes, all the craziest plays he's made. Like, you still want to go, oh my God, what a great play that was. But at the end of the day, you're like, oh, that's just Patrick Mahomes, out there doing what he does best. Just making plays where there's no play to be made. And so just having an athletic guy back there like that, I think is literally what makes the Chiefs just so fun to watch. Mm-hmm. Just like you're saying with the schoolyard ball and everything with Travis Kelce, obviously Tyreek Hill now down in Miami. You still have number 15 back there who is the ultimate puppet master of this. That's where it starts. Yeah, right. He's the ultimate puppet master of this schoolyard ball. But let's get ahead and get down into this conversation, because I know this is one thing that we texted about last night, and I know this is what we wanted to really talk about and dive into. We've got to do something about these roughing the passer calls, guys. I know that the Tua situation, scary. Concussions, scary. But this is going to ruin football, especially on NFL level, if this continues to go down the path the way it's going. Because, you look at the Tom Brady play the other day. the ball wasn't even out of Tom's hands. So what is a defender supposed to do? Like, I'm sitting there in my mind as a defensive player, I'm sitting there going, if this were to happen to, like, if this call were to be on me, I would lose my fucking mind if that happened to me. Like, how am I supposed to play football and be the defensive player that I'm supposed to be if I can't tackle somebody?
Yeah. That's
my sole job and sole purpose to be out there in that field, is to get guys on the ground. And by any means necessary.
What's the Chiefs that made the tackle? What's his name? I'm drawing a blank on his name. Doesn't matter. He made a comment in post game, where he's like, well, if you're gonna set this standard that protecting the quarterback is the end all be all for the way the rules are going to be written, which, again, that's not. They need to be protected to an extent, but if that's the way they're going to write the rules, then that play has to be reviewable. And one thing that I find, I think, the most fascinating, and this is, I'm obviously intimately familiar with it with basketball, but, I'm, again, learning more about how the game of football is officiated. And the one thing I really hate about the way the rules written is they don't officiate intent. And to me, it's obvious that the intent there wasn't to throw your body weight on top of the quarterback.
What are you supposed to do?
But that's my point. Like,
there's nothing he can do.
He can't be, running the physics of the play in his head and be like, well, if I hit him at this speed, at this, with him on this foot, I'm gonna end up landing on it. Like, you can't make that decision in real time.
Process
it's not your job is, and not only that, but he's got to be the first player in NFL history to be called for roughing the passer while physically possessing the football, because he stripped him before he ever hit him. But irregardless of that, if the rules are going to be written the way they are, the play has to be reviewable, because it doesn't. I know. They need to tone it back. But if they're going to call that was a complete transition of the game, because the Raiders,
that kills momentum going into halftime. They have to settle for a field goal.
Yeah, but it went from being Chiefs ball to a penalty and a fresh set of downs.
First down, automatic first down, fresh set of change.
They ended up winning the ball game, but that is bananas that one call can have that big of a change in the outcome of the game.
I'm sitting there thinking, like, who else could blow a 17-0 lead besides the Raiders? Oh, yeah, the Browns.
That's true.
But anyways, let's get back into that. But here's the thing. Here's my question. Do people not understand, and does the officiating not understand, that the game of football was created on the basis of sheer violence? Like, if the forefathers of football were to look down on us and see these calls being made and different things of that nature, of how football is, the direction that football is going in, I guarantee, and I can't speak for the forefathers of football, but if I was a forefather of football, I'm sitting there looking at it going, what in the absolute fuck are we doing?
There was a play. I saw something on Twitter yesterday that said, the tweet was worded something along the lines of, I can't believe that Tom Brady's been in the league long enough that things have changed this drastically. And it was a video of Tom in his early years, first couple years, it looked like, based on the vintage look of the video, where he got his block knocked off.
Oh, when he was going out of bounds.
I mean, no, he was giving himself up. He was sliding.
Giving himself up, and the guy came and fucking killed his ass.
Yeah, I mean, like, absolutely. Like, if they did that today, that defender would be in prison.
Or Sean Taylor absolutely taking a punter's head off in the Pro Bowl.
Yeah,
I mean, like, literally, like, I think Micah Parsons tweeted it last night. He said they're wanting us to play like it's the Pro Bowl.
Yeah,
I mean, here's the thing. There's a reason why you just got rid of the Pro Bowl, because nobody wants to fucking watch that.
Yeah,
there used to be highlights. There used to be segments on NFL Live of big hits. There used to be huge hits on college football. Like, that would be the greatest thing, to go on, YouTube and type in football big hits and just watch that shit and know that that's what the game's supposed to be. Like, I know that, like, I'm 25 and I played this game at a later stage in how football's been developed, but the way that I was raised to play football, the way that I think most of these guys were raised to play football, especially on the defensive side of the ball, is that this is your, like, for me, like, that was my fucking outlet to go out there and literally rip some motherfucker's head off. Like, I'm sure that that's across the board for a lot of players out there, and that's the reason why they want to play defense. I'm sorry, for people that, are, too soft to understand or realize that, but, that's what this game was meant to be played, or how it was meant to be played, is you play from whistle to whistle, and you knock someone's fucking block off each and every play.
Yeah.
That's how you're supposed to play it. I understand that with the targeting rules and everything like that, we want to protect the head. We want to make sure that, guys are safe out there. But where do we draw the line?
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point, like I tweeted last night, you might as well turn into a flag football league. And if that's the route you're going down, I know that the NFL is literally living off of ratings and hell, they're trying to expand it to Europe. Roger Goodell came out this week and said that they're trying to get their own NFL Europe back, having their own league over there. And so how can you expand a league that is sponging defensive players?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just don't understand it. Okay, if you're not going to let them hit, turn it to a 7-on-7 league, see how that works out for you. Because at the end of the day, football is meant to be lined up play after play. And like I've said, obviously, in this tantrum that I went on, it's about being violent, physical, to the point of contact through the whistle. And so I just don't understand how you can move forward with this if you don't, like you said, A, make it a reviewable call, or B, just tone it back. And I understand, guys, I understand that the Tua situation was scary. I understand that, with him getting slammed to the ground and the first thing that hit was his head, it's one of the more scarier things you can go through. And we talked about concussions. I couldn't even remember my name for a week. But at the end of the day, like I said last week, you know what you sign up for.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm a coal miner, I understand that every day I go in that coal mine, there is a good chance that son of a bitch can collapse on me and I never see my family again. If it doesn't, and I have a long career in that coal mine, there is a good chance that I come out that motherfucker with black lung and die of a young age. There's a really good chance that, just like, a truck driver, when he's driving across country, there's a good chance that he could get up in a big wreck and die. Like, every decision that you make, it's like we're trying to wrap these dudes in bubble wrap and go out there and play football, and you just can't do that.
Well, there's several components. We could go down a rabbit hole on this for a whole episode. There's several components that I think are important. If you're going to protect the quarterback, if that's the precedent that you're going to set, then the play has to be reviewable. I also think that intent should be able to, a ref should be able to make a call based on intent. That defender's intent was not to rough the passer. His intent was not to throw his body weight on top of him and injure Derek Carr. His intent was to tackle him and get him on the ground. There's nothing else he can do or control in that situation. So those two things have to be debatable, at least in order to get the call right. Furthermore, to your point, the Tua situation was scary, but that's affecting the ref's judgment as to what to call, right? It's not just that they're trying to set a precedent for the rules. It's a ref doesn't want to not throw that roughing the passer flag and Derek Carr get hurt, and now they're on the wrong side of that officiating mistake, right? That like the Tua ref was, right? So it's literally affecting every component of the game. You've got refs that are going to blow the whistle as quick as they can to make sure that they're not responsible for somebody's injury or on the wrong end of a video clip that's gone viral. And we've seen that time and time again.
Again, social media playing into the perspective of
it
decision
is.
makers.
Seriously. there was a basketball ref in the NCAA tournament several years ago. I don't know if you remember this. You were probably in school at the time, but several radio programs and TV programs posted the man's full-time job that he supports his family because of a bad call, right? So that's going into that's weighing in their decision making on how to make a call, and that's screwy. That's tough. The defender is having to decide, do I lunge and make this play for my team that I'm getting paid millions of dollars to make at the risk of a penalty that may or may not be accurately enforced? So that's going to weigh on them. Do they pull up and what if he pulled up a little bit because he's a little worried about hitting him too hard, and they end up getting a pass out of it?
And that's the thing, though. Here's the thing, too. Guys that get hurt out there
are playing timid.
Are the guys that play timid.
Yep. 100%.
That's how you get hurt. It's like, okay, do I need to hit this guy like this?
Yep.
Or do I lower my head like this? No. If you have a clear conscience out there going, no, I'm just going to run through this motherfucker, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get hurt.
Because it's not going to stop an offensive player from blocking the hell out of him.
Lowering his head and trying to come down on you and run your ass over. It's not going to happen.
Yep.
It's a crazy situation, man. But actually, we got to transition to this interview with Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South. We'll actually come back after this interview, and we'll talk about the Devontae Adams situation after we get Connor's weigh in on SEC football around the SEC and the Kentucky game. So enjoy our interview with senior columnist from Saturday Down South, Saturday Tradition, host of the Saturday Down South podcast, Connor O'Gara. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us now, senior columnist from Saturday Down South, host of the Saturday Down South podcast. I think I'm going to call him an insider for the SEC because I guess he's our first analyst, if you want to put it that way, to come in and talk SEC football with us. I got to hang out with him last year on the set of Paul Feinbaum, and we actually destroyed some chicken wings together in one of his visits down here to Lexington. None other than the man himself, Connor O'Gara. Connor, thanks for coming in with us, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. You know, I've thought about Roosters like a pretty good amount. I don't know if I've had a wing as good as Roosters in the last year plus. They're so good, man. Like that's the way that a wing should be. What did we go with? I think I just went with the standard medium or something like that. Medium. Just give me some buffalo sauce. That's all I need.
They got a good wide sauce list.
They do. I got on that Carolina Gold. That's my that's my favorite one. But speaking of Carolina, we'll jump right down into some SEC football talk. Obviously, Shane Beamer and the South Carolina Gamecocks came into Lexington last weekend. Shane Beamer got his first SEC road win in over a year. What did you take away from that game, and how can you see the Cats prepare themselves to take on a red-hot offense like Mississippi State coming up this Saturday?
You knew it was bad when the first play from scrimmage was this gadget play that South Carolina just completely blew up. And do they run something like that if Will Levis is on the field? Probably not to start off the game, but it was just the absolute worst-case scenario for Kaiya Sharon, a guy who was put in a tough spot. And what I think gets kind of lost in the shuffle of that game, in which Kentucky did not deserve to win that football game, and it wasn't just because Will Levis wasn't out there, but what kind of gets lost in the shuffle is, Kaiya Sharon ends up having his top three receivers all go down at different times during this game. And it was just a tough pill to swallow for Kentucky when, Mark Stoops has built this program. The climate versus culture argument was very well documented in the aftermath of this one. But he's built this program where they've just been able to kind of find a way. And this was a game in which it felt like a true letdown with that atmosphere. And we knew the circumstances with Will Levis, but they just couldn't find ways to help themselves, whether that was in special teams, whether that was scheming guys open, whatever it was, it just wasn't there. And I thought it was a very tough setback for a program that, a week and a half ago, we're talking about whether or not they're going to be moving into the top five with a win against Ole Miss.
I mean, it seemed like to me that, I was on the field for pregame, and you could just get a sense of flatness, if we want to put it that way. The guys kind of came out flat. I didn't really feel, the juice that I usually feel when I walk into that stadium, when I watch those guys go through warm-ups and things like that. And so, obviously, having your white knight out there and Will Levis, being down and not out there, obviously, creates some kind of worry in the back of your mind of, we're going to have to go out here and, be able to execute our game plan. But it's kind of disappointing to see that where Kentucky football is and how it's been hyped up to where it is now, to where, that shouldn't be even a thought in your mind. It should be a next man up mentality, and let's go out here and support this guy, let's support this kid and be able to move the ball down the field. But like you said, I don't understand how you have the biggest workhorse in the SEC and Chris Rodriguez, and you don't give the ball to him, on 1st and 10 right there at the beginning of the game and try to run. I understand, I was talking to the guys here earlier before, when we would come in and we would play teams that we felt like couldn't beat us straight up. Obviously, we were expecting some trick plays, early, but we never expected it, the first play of the game. Obviously, it might be in the back of your mind. And then the thing with defensive guys is that, as long as you're reading your keys and making sure that your eyes aren't supposed to be where they are, everything will take care of itself. And so seeing, them come out and run that play from the first snap, obviously, if you look back from a 30,000-foot view of it, if we steal that block there on the edge, you look back on the field, it could be, 88 out the gate, or at least, a couple yard gain down the field. And so we were actually saying it's one of those situations where, if it works, we look great. If it doesn't work, obviously we look like idiots, and that's what we did. But, with Mississippi State and with Mike Leach coming in and that high-power air raid offense, with Will Rogers being able to sit back there. Last year I looked back at that game, and I saw that you give Will Rogers enough time back there in the pocket and you don't be able to disrupt him, he could literally pick zone defenses apart. I think one of the greatest quarterbacks in the SEC of being able to look defenders off one way and come back to another and finding receivers in those holes. So what do you see Kentucky as a defensive perspective having to do to control that air raid offense that Mike Leach brings to that program?
So here's the dangerous thing, and why Mississippi State, in my opinion, is one of the 15 best teams in the country. They might be one of the 10 best teams in the country now with how well they are playing. They will run against a three-man front. They ran the ball 36 times against Arkansas because Barry Odom did just that. He dropped 8 into coverage. And then repeatedly, they got Dylan Johnson involved. If you haven't seen Dylan Johnson kind of get going yet, the Mississippi State running back, yes, a running back in the air raid offense, he looks darn good. And he is an extremely physical back that can get going with a head of steam. And so on top of the fact that Will Rogers can just set up shop and have all day to throw, if you're not going to pressure him and pick you apart, you now have a ground game that Mike Leach is willing to go to. So you've got that. And then, oh, by the way, you've got Zach Arnett in his defense, which not enough people are talking about what they're doing with the 3-3-5 and how difficult that's been for teams to be able to sustain scoring drives against. And what they have is experience. 17 guys on that 2 deep have at least 3 years of experience now in the Zach Arnett scheme. That's why they look like they're always in the right place at the right time. They got these guys, Jet Johnson, Emmanuel Forbes, these guys who aren't necessarily household names, but they should be. And they are an extremely difficult football team to beat. They have special teams issues like Kentucky has had this year. But other than that, man, it is really hard to find a weakness with what they've been able to do in the first part of the year.
So if you're looking at this game from a grand scheme of everything, what would be your 3 keys to victory for the Kentucky Wildcats be this weekend?
Got to get pressure on Will Rogers off the edge. Their tackles are a little bit shaky, right? Charles Cross got drafted 10 overall, and I'm still not totally sold that they've figured out their option there at left tackle and at right tackle. If you can get pressure rushing off the edge and speed Will Rogers up a little bit, that's huge. Kentucky needs to be able to do that. You can't have the turnovers. The turnovers have just been a death sentence for Kentucky. And while they were able to get away with it at certain points last year, obviously, you need to be able to protect the football at home. You can't be coughing the football up. That's going to be just absolutely costly. And then the most obvious thing, I mean, the special teams miscues. They've been so brutal this year. Block punts, all of a sudden you can't make a field goal and you're just kind of looking around like, man, even in the Florida game, they gave away 6 points in special teams. You cannot have that against a team this good. Mississippi State, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Those are the 3 things that I kind of look at that Kentucky's got to be able to shore up.
A big SEC West versus SEC East matchup coming in Lexington this weekend. Let's go ahead and transfer over to the SEC West. Obviously, this last weekend, the Alabama Crimson Tide was without Bryce Young in the anticipated matchup against Texas A&M and Alabama. What did you take away from that game, and what do you see coming up this weekend as we have 2 undefeated teams, Alabama rolling into Knoxville, taking on a red-hot Tennessee Volunteers football team?
Kentucky fans saw what it looks like to have a backup quarterback in there and kind of how terrifying that is when your veteran starter isn't out there. And Alabama fans saw the same thing because every single time the pocket collapsed against Jalen Milroe, you were like, oh my gosh, it's a fumble's about to happen because he doesn't have 2 hands on the football. And A&M would just swipe at his hands, and all of a sudden like that, you're looking up and realizing, wow, Alabama has 4 turnovers. Alabama had 4 turnovers in that game. They missed 2 kicks. And still you're realizing at the end, wow, A&M has a chance to win, and they somehow only had 20 points in that game. Jimbo Fisher, credit to him for that. But yeah, Alabama is limited without Bryce Young. I mean, that's as simple as I can put it. If Jalen Milroe is out there, they're a one-dimensional offense. They are, at least right now with his stage of his development and the receivers that they have. This is a fascinating showdown against Tennessee, a Tennessee team that has been one of the best stories in college football so far. And Hendon Hooker, if you haven't watched him play yet, the dude is electric. Josh Heupel's offense is high-powered. It's explosive. They're expected to get Cedric Tillman back this weekend. That's pivotal. He might be the best receiver in the SEC. But it's going to be a great showdown. I think Bryce Young's going to be out there. I hope he's going to be out there. We're going to have 4 legitimate Heisman candidates from the SEC playing in this football game with Jahmyr Gibbs and Will Anderson, obviously, as well. So should be an awesome one on Rocky Top, and I'm really looking forward to it, especially if Bryce Young's able to play.
I was going to ask, that was going to be my next question. Do we expect to see Bryce Young out there? Obviously, like you were talking about with the backup quarterback coming in last week against Texas A&M, there's a little bit of a difference out there when you have the Heisman winner from last year out there controlling their offense versus a backup with minimal experiences back there controlling an SEC offense. What do you see in Hendon Hooker? Because in my personal opinion, he's my favorite right now for the Heisman Trophy. If I was a Heisman voter, Hendon Hooker's probably one of the top guys up there for me. So what do you see in Hendon Hooker from the times, because I got to play against him at Virginia Tech in that bowl game. Mm-hmm. And, I'm sitting there asking myself, was it a scheme thing when he was at Virginia Tech versus when he's with Josh Heupel? What are you seeing from Hendon Hooker that makes him such a great talent to watch each and every Saturday?
One of the things that I asked Tavion Robinson about when he came on Saturday Down South podcast, obviously Tavion knows Hendon, having played with him at Virginia Tech, was, what has it been like to watch Hendon kind of from afar thrive at Tennessee? And he said they're letting Hendon be Hendon. And you can see when he gets the ability to kind of unleash that deep ball, it just changes everything, because we know that when a play breaks down, he can make plays with his legs. But that explosiveness in that offense and the receivers that they have developed, that's just a game changer. You didn't even realize in that game against LSU, a game in which they won 40-13, that they were without Tillman, because Jalen Hyatt has developed an incredibly fast way out of the slot. And then Brew McCoy, the transfer from USC, the former 5-star, is built like a linebacker. He's built like you, Cash. I mean, this guy is just going up and making plays on the outside. And they have so many different dimensions of that offense that it makes them so explosive, so fun to watch. And it doesn't really matter if Hooker, gets off schedule and all of a sudden it's like, all right, he takes a big hit on third down, they got to punt it away. He just comes back out firing, and the explosiveness is second to none right now. It's crazy to watch this transformation. A guy that's going to be 25 in January to have this kind of late rise in his career. Sign me up for any time Hendon Hooker is spinning it. I love watching this Tennessee team play. They can light it up as quick as anybody in the country.
Let's keep it in the ACC East. Let's talk about the Georgia Bulldogs. Last weekend.
You do that. I got to hear your pick then. I got to hear your pick for Tennessee, Alabama.
He just said Rocky Top.
Oh, now I'm hedging. I'm hedging. I'm hedging.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that.
No, you're good. I don't think I even said that, actually. I'm so locked into the way that this game's going to play out. I think that Tennessee covers 7.5. I don't think Tennessee wins this game. I think that Tennessee is able to make enough plays to be able to make this close. I mean, Alabama has played in these true road games dating back to 2021. 4 of those 6 true road games have been decided by 3 points or less. So playing in a 1-score game is not crazy. I know that line is Tennessee plus 7.5. So I'm going to pick Bama to win, but I would pick Tennessee to cover.
Now, is that line coming out with Bryce Young expecting to play, or is if when he's named the starter, could you see that line shifting a little bit?
I could see it shifting a little bit, but I think the odds makers think he's going to play, because he was telling Saban in the fourth quarter of that game, put me back in. I want to play. I'm ready to go. He didn't do any throwing in warmups, because when you do throwing, then we dissect that, we overanalyze that. And if he looks bad in any way, shape, or form with that shoulder, then of course we're going to be, probably talking about that all week. But I think he's going to be back and ready to go. It looked like he was the emergency quarterback in that game against A&M.
Well, it should be a rowdy time down in Knoxville. I know I can't wait to get down there here in a couple weeks to watch the Cats take on the Vols. But as I was saying, let's go over to the Georgia Bulldogs and Kirby Smart. This past Saturday, it looked like the Georgia of old. The last couple of weeks they've been kind of lackadaisical, and a scare 2 weeks ago against Missouri. What did you see from that Auburn game, and can we see that this Georgia football moving forward for the rest of the season?
2 things can be true at the same time. One is that Georgia is one of 3 teams in all of college football that can win a national championship. Ohio State, Alabama. Those are the other 2. The other is that this Georgia offense, this passing game in particular, has had some struggles these last 3 weeks, and they need to get that figured out if they're going to repeat, if they're going to be the first team to repeat since Alabama 2011, 2012. I think that this Georgia team is still a little bit lost offensively. They had 29 passing yards in the first half of that game, and Stetson says afterwards, after they beat Auburn 42-10, he says, yeah, we need to get our moxie back. And they do. I think there's something to be said for that. They need to get healthier at the receiver position. They miss A.D. Mitchell a lot. Ladd McConkey has kind of had his struggles, but Stetson's just been a little bit off. And that's kind of what it all comes down to. As great as the tight ends are, and Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers should be illegal, those guys are cheat codes as far as I'm concerned, their involvement can't be it for the passing game. They need other guys to be able to step up, because I think that's what takes this offense to a new level, because defensively, you knew they were going to regress. You can't have 8 starters replaced from that historic defense and not regress a little bit defensively, and they have done that so far. So I think Georgia's still kind of figuring out who exactly it is, but I still think that they're going to be in really good shape. I had Tennessee beating Georgia. I'm sticking with that prediction that Tennessee's going to beat Georgia in that head-to-head. I still think Georgia's going to win the East and ultimately go to Atlanta, have a chance to play for a spot in the college football playoff, but they're working through some issues right now.
Well, it kind of looked like the Cats basically pissed away their chances at the SEC's title this year with that loss against South Carolina. But, just moving forward, what are the things that Kentucky – I know we've already talked about the keys to victory this week, but overall as a team, what does Kentucky have to do to be able to get this thing back on track? Because it's looking like to where, they were hyped up preseason. We had a great win against Florida, even though it was the most talented Florida team that they've had in recent years past. What are some of the things that Kentucky has got to be able to do to get things back on track moving forward for the rest of this season?
I think it's kind of crazy that Kentucky, at that point in the season was in the top 10, given what we've talked about them from a historical perspective with not getting the love from voters in the AP poll and stuff, and the fact that they have these 2 losses and they're still in the top 25. I think that just kind of shows you how much people are respecting Mark Stoops' program more than they used to, for sure. But this is about, I still think this is still about Will Levis staying upright, which with the quarterback depth issues is a massive question mark. And Will Levis, we know he's not going to slide. He's not going to dial it back. He is who he is, for better, for worse. He still needs to be better with the football. I think we can agree that you see some of those plays against Ole Miss, you're like, all right, you can't take a safety in that spot. You take a safety and you end up getting your finger bent like 6 different ways. You can't have that in that moment. You just got to be able to throw that football away. And then obviously when he's trying to make a play on 3rd down there and trying to pick up the 1st down and to fumble that football, that's tough. And it's easy for us to say, oh yeah, you just got to dial it back. He plays with a certain level of intensity and you kind of just have to live with that. And it sounds like Mark Stoops has accepted that. But you got to keep him healthy. And you got to keep C-Rod upright. I mean, those 2 things seem so pivotal for this offense. I think they have enough depth at receiver to make me feel confident this year, even more so than last year, that their passing game isn't really going to be that stagnant. But C-Rod's just such a difference maker. And I don't mean that as a disrespect to Kavasier Smoke or to anybody else in that backfield, but you watch the guy just get hit at the line of scrimmage and then gain 3 or 4 yards. Or, you see him when he gets ahead of steam early in that game and you see him really kind of get cooking. And it's just different with him. And the yards after contact is second to none. So I look at those things. And then defensively, man, they got to get healthy in the front 7. I think that not having Jacquez Jones has hurt this team. The loss of JJ Weaver early on, you get him back. They just seem like they can't get healthy at the same time kind of right now. And I think that's hurting this defense be a little bit more consistent. You saw the Juice Wells screenplay where, that's a play that you rarely see from a Mark Stoops defense. You just do not see those kinds of missed tackles, that lack of discipline. And Kentucky needs to be able to figure that out. And then if they can make a kick, I think that would help too.
Yeah, that on that particular screenplay kind of reminded me of last year when Tennessee came in and they just absolutely just destroyed us off explosive plays alone. It was just one of those things where, like I said, in pregame, it just seems like things were just kind of flat. But hopefully they can get things figured out and hopefully we can turn this thing around. But Connor, I know you got a lot going on, man. Appreciate your time coming on here. And next time you're in Lexington, man, we'll get down some chicken wings again. All right.
Absolutely, man. I'm going to be thinking
Hey,
about
Connor,
Roosters
let me leave you with one quick question. But you can be short. But if Will's able to stay healthy, we saw down in Oxford that Todd McShay said he's his favorite for the quarterback, the first pick in the quarterback in the draft this year. Do you see that he has that potential?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's going to be a first-round quarterback. I do. And, one of the things that Todd has talked about with Levis and why he is so intriguing right now is because I don't think anybody's saying that he's a finished product, but he's going to crush the pre-draft process. He absolutely is. Anybody that's spent any time around him just kind of gets it. And the people that are skeptical about him haven't spent that time around him, and they don't necessarily see the intangibles, the leadership skills, and the way that he just kind of commands a locker room. And like, those things are cliche, but that stuff matters. I mean, Cash, we've talked about this. Like, you just need that alpha. Will Levis is that alpha. You never question that with him. And you always know that he has the accountability that you just kind of need at the quarterback position. So I do think he's going to end up being a first round guy. And, I find myself just hoping that he goes to the right situation. Maybe that's at the top of the draft to a certain Chicago Bears franchise that might not have a quarterback of the future.
Definitely need that.
Yeah, they need that. But yeah, I'm excited for his future. And I think he'll end up being a first round guy.
Hopefully it's not a Tim Couch situation where he shipped off to the factory of sadness in Cleveland and just has a career that if you go, well, if he was drafted to another team, he may have a longer, more, successful career. But again, Connor, appreciate your time hopping on, man. We'll catch you down the road, okay?
Absolutely. Appreciate it, guys.
Appreciate you.
Can't thank Connor enough for jumping on here with us. I actually broke it down pretty analytically.
I mean, that
was awesome.
By far the best analytical conversation that we've had. I just had to sit there in fascination, honestly.
I mean, he killed it. I mean, that's like I was saying. I mean, we're trying to get to his level, and so
yeah. But you posed the questions properly, but he was right on all. I mean, that was good. That was good.
But we talked, like we said, we talked about Kentucky, what they got to do. One of the things we got to be able to get pressure this week on Will Rogers. Talking about last week with Arkansas being up against a 3-man front. I could see Brad White having a little mixture of things. Brad White knows what he's doing. I believe that. In the next couple of years, I think you'll see Brad White be an NFL defensive coordinator back up in the league. And so I could see him just switching things around and be able to put guys in position to win. But like he's saying, having Jacquez Jones not out there, that really puts a hurting on your front seven. So hopefully Kentucky can get some things rolling, be able to get some things going on offense as well, and hopefully number 7's back out there for us. But what a guy!
Let's go to let's rattle off
rapid reactions.
Those rapid reactions from those 3 keys to the game.
3 keys to victory that Connor said. So first thing he said was pressure on edges, right? So right now, where do you think Kentucky ranks in sacks?
Bottom of the list.
In D1?
All of FBS?
340.
They're tied for 100th right now with 8.
Yeah.
With 8 sacks. Okay, so that's –
okay.
We just don't get a lot of sacks.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, number 2, he said no turnovers. We've had turnovers in every single game we've had.
Well, that seems like a common theme in the last 2 years with Kentucky. I know last year – C-Rod had an issue with holding on to the football, and Will Levis doing an interception literally every single game. So that's a common theme for the last 2 years of Kentucky football. So, and here's the thing. I know that it is harped on throughout the week and throughout training camp, throughout spring ball, to protect the football. A former coach, when we were there, would always say, when the ball's in your hands, the program's in your hands. And that couldn't be more true. Right. So Kentucky's got to be able to find a way to not turn the ball over, especially against a red-hot air raid team like Mississippi State.
I have a stupid question real quick. Is a turnover on downs considered a turnover?
Yes.
It is, right?
That's
okay.
Because changing a possession.
Yeah, I'm just making sure because we've had several on special teams alone.
So that was the next key to victory, which you don't need any stats for this.
I don't.
Special teams.
It's just been an absolute train wreck so far.
There's no stats to be had. You watch the games.
And I love Ruff and and I love all those dudes there they played when I was there. But that's your sole job. And I don't want to come out here and degrade punters and kickers because obviously they're probably one of the biggest parts of the game. Mm-hmm. But when your name is called on, you've got to be able to go out there and execute. You're not reading defenses. You're not worrying about, a blitzing linebacker versus a delayed blitzing safety or anything like that. Your sole job is to go out there and kick the ball and be able to put it through the upright and be able to do it efficiently and not have bad snaps, miss holds, block punts. And so obviously that comes too with the protection. So, the entire special teams unit has got to be able to step up and be able to take ownership of, the flaws that they've had these past couple of weeks, like we're talking about too, even gave away 6 points there in the Florida game. So, I think the special teams has always been part of our kryptonite as far as the way that we lose games. I don't think there's been one game where I could sit back and go, okay, we lost this game. Let's go to see how special teams worked out. Did we have a bad snap? Did we have a brutally missed kick? Did we have a block punt? Did we have a return on us? What did we have? Because that seems like to be a common theme, and a lot of things that people don't forget or people forget about is that, winning the special teams battle. You win the special teams battle. One of our special teams coordinators at the time said, if you win the special teams battle, I can't remember exactly what numbers he was throwing out, but you win the special teams battles, you have a 92, 93% chance of winning that game.
See, that's a good point because what I think, we all in sports fall into the trap of a little too often is if we'd have won, we won that Florida game. We didn't talk about those 6 points we gave away on special teams because we won the game. If we'd have won, we'd have beat Ole Miss, and if we'd have beat South Carolina, we wouldn't be having this discussion about how our special teams has failed us as drastically. I'm saying but it ended up making a difference in the win column. So now we need to address it because we have to have something to point at. Go ahead.
Well, I feel a certain type of way about what happened at Florida. So the snap that went over the punter's head, right, and he had to kick it out of the back, which resulted in the safety.
Which was the smartest thing to do.
Yeah,
right. Everybody's mad. Obviously, we want the snapper to be better, right? Because that's obviously been a huge issue from the time of the snap. But if you remember what happened after the snap went over his head, the next series is when Wright intercepted the ball.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if that snap doesn't happen, that was a game-changing interception.
Yeah.
So
well, back to this.
Don't know.
Back to the original conversation.
It's just like we were talking about.
Exactly.
You don't
know. It could be any play.
Right.
Game of inches. If it works, we look great. If it doesn't work, we're done.
I have a question for you, Cash. So for an average fan looking in, I've seen everywhere that Kentucky does not have a true special teams coach dedicated. Is that true? Like hired for that?
It's true to a certain point. Now, when I was there, we had Dean Hood, and I can talk about Dean Hood for the remainder of this episode and what he's meant to my life, what he's meant to my family's life, My cousin Scott played for him when he was the head coach there at EKU. Hoodie actually played with my dad's high school best friend, Eric Gray, at Ohio Wesleyan University. So there was always a connection there with Coach Hood. He actually recruited me when he was still at EKU, and I was coming up in the recruiting ranks. And so when Coach Hood got that job, he was brought on as outside linebackers coach at first and special teams coordinator. He was always a special teams coordinator throughout his time at Kentucky. And so me and Scott, my cousin, would actually, we would make jokes about, how long and detailed those special teams meetings were. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anybody take special teams as serious as Dean Hood does. And I believe that's the reason why for the 3 or 4 years that he was there, we led the SEC in special teams. Like we're talking about the numbers and you win the special teams battle. Right. That was a precedent and a standard that was set each and every week that, we come out, we make sure we count right. We block the right guys. We have the right snap count. We have the right motions. We do this, do that. Now, I would imagine since Coach Hood has left, we've kept everything that Coach Hood's put in. From me looking at it from a kickoff standpoint to where I used to run the punt team and the personal protector, everything is still the same. It's just a different guy calling it. But, Coach Matt Sakis, I think that, he learned a lot from Coach Hood, but Coach Hood was that, I'll say it, man. He was that dog. Coach Hood was a dog, man. But it is true. We don't technically on paper, we do not have a special teams coordinator, which I think that's why we've heard Max Duffy say that he wants to be the special teams coordinator for so long.
I just, from outside looking in, for somebody that doesn't know, it just seems that seems so important. Because if you listen to the broadcast, like Frank Beamer, right, for what they were talking about, a dog, right, when it comes to special teams. And I think that is, we lack the attention to detail on special teams.
Man,
it just seems that way from my point of view.
Exactly. But I wish that you could have seen the attention to detail when Coach Hood was there, because you would have the same thought process and feelings that I do about it, because I'm telling you, those Monday practices, I mean, if anything was an inch off, a guy didn't take the correct step, he may have still made the block. Right. But if he didn't take the right angle with his flat step, then up into the guy, or if he didn't take a drop step and have to get to the outside shoulder of the guy and turn him in, I mean, you were getting coached and you were getting motherfucked right there. Yep. Just letting you know that, hey, you may have got that block, but you don't have the right footwork and technique to be able to seal that guy off or be able to get in front of that guy. It's going to get blocked some way, one way or another. One game, it's going to be slipped up to where, they understand, your process of stepping out on them. And they're going to realize that, especially a good special teams coach up in the box is going to see that and be like, okay, we need to change some of these things up here, run a little stunt, get a block punt, get us our offense down in position to score. And so the attention to detail, I think, is the biggest thing that Kentucky special teams have been missing in the past couple of years. So, yeah, there's definitely a little bit of attention to detail issue there. But let's go ahead and move back into our conversation we had before we went to Connor on that Monday night game. We talked about the crazy roughing the passer call, but let's also get into what happened after the game. We talked about how Davante Adams was kind of pissed off after that loss on Monday night, and I think the cameraman got the worst end of that. But roughing the cameraman action, yeah. But actually, as we just learned, the cameraman has filed a police report and lawsuit to sue Davante Adams for the altercation that happened after the game in the tunnel. But it did say, like you said, off air, he was taken by private transportation.
Private transportation to the
Arranged
hospital. Arranged his own transportation.
I mean, what did he do, call an Uber? I mean, I think at that point he probably called a limo because he knew about the bag he's about to get. He's like, yeah, bro, come on, pick me up, man. I got a neck bracelet on. Let me hop out this damn limo because I know I'm gonna be using you a lot more after this motherfucker. But I mean, in that situation, I mean, I can understand. I see things from both sides. Obviously, I've not been in a particular situation like that. Obviously, you don't need to put your hands on anybody in that kind of situation, especially when you're the top dog. All eyes are on you. You got to know that all the cameras are on you. I mean, there's just no hiding in that situation. So, I mean, maybe would it be a different story if the cameras weren't on him? Maybe if somebody came through and after he got in the tunnel, might be a different story because it's not as publicized now. But in that situation, I understand your frustration. I've been there. I actually told Brandon a story, about me and how I wasn't proud of it. I didn't put my hands on anybody at that particular time, but I did use some colorful language after a bad loss, but I mean, you put so much time and effort into that game plan for that week, into perfecting your craft and being the best that you can be day in and day out. And to be able to lose a game like that, or in my situation, when we lost that game, you know, you don't want to see anybody. You don't want to talk to anybody. It literally just feels like I just did all that extra work for fucking nothing type deal. You know, we come out here, we're, 1-5, we come out here, we had Kansas City beat 17-0, and then we come back and we lose this game the way we did. Me and Hunter Renfrow run into each other, whatever. But at the same time, you got to understand, where you are, who's watching, and where the cameras are always going to be at, because you just, at the end of the day, you can't put your hands on a guy like that. Now, from looking at the video, I mean, did the guy actually have a camera in his hand, or was it just a metal rod? He was just
crossing by,
but he popped up, but like
it looked to me like a phone on a.
But
tripod.
It looked to me like I can understand, like, if you're walking and if I see Davante Adams coming, I'm not going to pop up. It was pretty quick. Like, it wasn't like Davante literally locked eyes on him walking 10 yards down from the field, and then the guy wouldn't move and shoved him. The guy literally popped up and tried to cross him right there, and then Davante put his hands on him. Now, like I said, you can't do that. Obviously, you could say, get the fuck out of the way, or some shit like that. But, obviously, looking at it now, that guy's going to get a bag.
I mean, the thing is, like, you just have to be a professional, right? Like, he's being...
News?
I'm watching the video.
No, I was about to say, we got breaking news.
No. So he literally was just going through the tunnel.
Yeah.
Like, he just crossed in front. He didn't pop up.
Yeah.
He literally was just
walking across
by.
the tunnel.
And just so happened, they just crossed past the same. He wasn't taking pictures of him.
Yeah.
He was literally walking.
Yeah. It's unfortunate timing, unfortunate reaction. But, like, Davante Adams is, blessed enough to be in a position where he's making a lot of money to play the game of football. He's going to have to answer for what he does on the field and for what he does off the field.
But I just don't understand. Like, okay, here's my thing. Davante Adams apologized publicly with the media. He apologized on Twitter. We do not know if he apologized to him personally, which would have been the first thing I would have done instead of going to Twitter and going to, there. I would have been like, hey, man, like, maybe. But here's the thing. Maybe he had his private transportation waiting on him because he knew he was about to get that bag. Didn't want to wait on an apology, so he couldn't change his mind. But, in that situation, everybody's calling for a suspension. I just don't see it. I understand that I understand that he's an innocent bystander, out there doing his job, just like Davante Adams is out there doing his job. And I understand that Davante Adams gets paid a hell of a lot more money to do his job. But the reason Davante Adams gets paid a hell of a lot more money to do his job because, he's one of the greatest receivers of all time. Yeah. Not degrading the cameraman for what he does, because obviously he probably got the dope footage and probably puts out great edits and things like that. But a suspension from the game in itself, I just don't see that being justifiable, because the guy's already going to get a bag from the lawsuit. He's going to pay NFL fines. He's going to pay fines with the Raiders, And good thing is, like you're saying, Davante Adams is blessed enough to be in a position that he is, to where Davante Adams can actually afford to be able to pay those off. But at the end of the day, like you said, you got to be a professional. You got to know who's watching. You got to understand that, there's millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people that would love to be in your shoes and that are watching you with the closest eye and just waiting for you to do something like that. Mm-hmm. They're just sitting there preying on you to fuck up somehow. And unfortunately, Davante Adams fucked up.
That's why I said it the way I said it. Like, you've put all this time, energy, and effort into getting yourself in that position. Like, that could potentially cost him, kids that are fans, that, it could cost him jersey sales. It's just, the thing is, I get it's an unfortunate circumstance. Your emotions are running high. I'm not saying, that it's in any way justified, but I don't, let me rephrase that. I don't like that somebody could have an altercation that's somewhat innocent, and then he could be publicly scrutinized, but he has to recognize that that's the position he's in. Yeah, that's the difference.
It's the it's the yin and yang of everything. I mean, like, there's a consequence that has to be paid with anything good that comes. I mean, you're the
called taxes.
Yeah,
usually.
Yeah, you're the greatest receiver in NFL. Well, guess what? You're going to get hated on Twitter. You're going to get hated on almost every social media platform now. And like I just said, there's going to be millions of people, especially opposing fans, that and that's the thing. Like, I don't like the older I've gotten, like, I just don't understand like hatred between like two, just because a guy plays for a certain team.
Yeah.
You understand? Like, I just never understood that. But they're, like I said, they're waiting for you to mess up on something, whether it be on the field, off the field, in the tunnel, doesn't matter, because you're already public enemy number one to them. Now, what do you think you're going to be? You know? And so, I mean, I've even learned, that lesson the hard way, in the fact of, some stupid shit that I've done out there on the field.
You just don't, you just don't give him an excuse, right? Like, he's, I'm sure a great guy, a likable guy off the field.
That's what everybody said.
But you gave him an excuse, and you have to know in that situation, I have more to lose than he does,
right?
So I'm gonna keep my cool. But again, it's an emotional game, especially considering the couple mistakes that were made to finish it off, especially considering the 17-point comeback that they allowed. You're in the opposing arena. He's probably getting booed, name called as he's walking out the tunnel.
Those guys, and especially
leaning
after
over
they
the
saw
edge.
that, those Chiefs fans were going.
And so it's ass. I'm not gonna pretend that I'm in that situation, but you just have to be aware of your surroundings and the consequences that can come from doing something as a knee jerk reaction like that. So learn the lesson, don't do it again, but.
No,
he's going to get that cameraman's going to get more than a gift basket.
Absolutely. But speaking of physical altercations, let's transition over to your world a little bit into basketball. I'm going to let you take this one.
Okay. Well, I'll toss to Zach for a good portion of this. Zach and I both grew up. Zach in Pikeville, me in Lexington.
606, by God.
Grew up basketball fans. Both been going to Madness as long as I can remember. I was a fan before I was lucky enough to be on the team. Getting to be a part of Madness was always, something I really looked forward to. What?
I was talking about the Draymond Green situation.
I thought you were talking about Madness.
I said, speaking of physical altercations, let's toss it over to your world.
Well, I had a segue there, but I'll go ahead and go to the Draymond Green first. Thing part first. Good English.
You want to redo that?
No, I don't care. No. So Draymond,
we're fully unscripted.
Yeah, fully unscripted. That's next on the list was.
I was trying to script it for you.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's why I didn't work.
The Draymond Green thing is, unfortunately, a story of the same situation. Like you're in a position where you have to recognize what you have to lose by acting out of emotion. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Draymond and Jordan Poole are both up for new contracts soon. Draymond's a vet, but he's getting older.
Yeah, he old.
Jordan is,
if
really
anybody
coming
can name
into
that
his
movie,
own
by the
way.
way, I'll send him $5 on Cash App.
Jordan's, coming into his way in this league and with this team. He's certainly earned his bag as well. And basically, the program is going to have to decide where to allocate a lot of that funding and how to maneuver through that. And both of those guys are very well aware of.
I think he just helped him.
That's what I'm saying. They're both very well aware of what's going on, in the front office over there. Draymond's given the entirety of his professional career to that team, and wants to be compensated. But they got a lot of guys there that are worth a lot of money. So those emotions are building, and I'm sure there were things said in practice. I'm sure they've been going at each other's neck for the last couple of weeks, and unfortunately they just had a little scuffle situation where Draymond chested up against him and Jordan pushed him, and Draymond absolutely cold cocked him.
I wanted to get to that. That wasn't just a punch.
No,
that was a Roman Reigns Superman punch,
and Draymond is not a little guy.
100%. Like it's unfortunate what happened.
He connected.
We can't take away what a fucking punch that was.
He connected.
For sure. And he dropped.
Yeah,
Jordan Poole dropped like a sack of rocks. But one question I had for you. So I'm not going to sit here, like I said, the reason we started this show is because I compliment you on football, you compliment me on basketball. But from a teammate perspective, okay, for example, going back and watching the Last Dance. the altercation that Michael Jordan and Steve Kerr got into. Same thing, And Steve Kerr actually said that was probably the pivoting turning point of that season. Was probably one of the best things that could have happened. So, how do you because is it an era difference? Is it because nowadays, any type of physical violence is like, oh no, can't do that.
Let's get one thing very clear, right?
I'm not.
I know, but
not comparing them whatsoever.
I know, but I'm saying Jordan is, Jordan, and Steve Kerr was, right, wrong, or indifferent, is ultimately going to succumb to what the GOAT wants. Like, however that dynamic needs to look. Like that's the way it is, right? With the Warriors here, there's kind of a little bit of a transition of power. First off, it's Steph's team, right? And Draymond is again getting a little bit older. Jordan's trying to step into this role. It could very easily cause some division, especially when the front office ultimately likely decides to pay Jordan a hell of a lot of money.
Especially when it's like publicized.
That's what I'm saying. And unfortunately, we live in an era where it's on video, and some video coordinator. I mean, the reports say that he was paid.
It was just showing 10,000 now.
Okay,
is what it came back out, because originally it was like 2.6 million.
Yeah, which is bananas.
But didn't the Warriors sue him?
Yeah,
they should.
They're taking all legal.
Yeah, they should.
So basically, that $10,000 and multiple.
Yeah, it's going to cost. They will ensure that it costs him more than he got paid for that video. But he had to know that when he made the decision. But
to the point that you've made about how social media influences, if that video doesn't get leaked, then there's no issue.
It's a locker room issue, 100%.
It's not talked about. It's not dragged on.
There were. I'm not going to say who, but there were several times that things came to blow in practice with teams I've been on.
Dude.
That
football fights were like
common,
nothing.
But it did become a locker room situation that we grew from, right? Because it is an emotional game. You're in a battle, to win minutes, to win, what could potentially, extrapolate to your future with draft selection and all that stuff, like earning starting spots, all those things. Again, when you extrapolate it across your career, everybody's trying to grind and fight for that spot, and ultimately down the road provide for their family with the money they're going to make playing this game. It's an emotional thing, and in practice, that's a sacred place. That stuff. What happens in the locker room, what happens in practice, what happens in that unit
stays there.
Should stay there.
Oh,
because
and it does.
The real world could not handle what actually happens in those rooms and on that practice field and on that court. It's just you can't replicate those what other job do you have that you can physically take your aggression out on
Hockey,
your coworker?
The greatest sport of all time.
Okay, I'm saying outside of sports. Outside of sports. So that it has to be somewhat.
They get into it all the time.
I think the best way to compare it is family.
Right?
Yeah,
right.
Family, brothers are going to fight.
When you family, you argue, you fight. I think.
Yeah, but you don't go post a video of you and your dad talking shit to each other on
I posted my dad and my brother talking shit to each other.
but kind of piggybacking off what you were talking about, like how there were multiple times when things would come to blow. There's this one particular time that I remember, and I'm not going to name names, but he came up to me. We had 2 bad practices in camp at that point, and this is my junior year. And he came up to me and was like, "Hey, we got to do something to create some spark today. Like, we got to do something." I was like, "All right." He goes, "What are you thinking?" He goes, "I think me and you should start a fight." And I was like, "Really?" And I go, like, "Okay. I mean, what do you think?" He goes, like, "All right, if I don't want to say it because it'll probably give it up, but when we get up from the ground, let's just get after it." I mean, like, I'm talking. I mean, obviously we're boys. We're gonna dap up afterwards. Like, if it works, it works. If it don't, it don't. But let's get after.
So you got whooped?
No, it got no, dude. It was, and the thing about it is, it turned into an offense versus defense fight, and the defense got hyped, the offense got hyped, and throughout the rest of practice, it was bang, 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 bang.
That injection
just
you
straight
needed,
competition, and just that endorphins releasing your brain of like, okay, motherfucker, it's time to get after it. But I'm just all like everything you were talking about. The locker room is just the most sacred place that's been a part of my life, man. I mean, that's the biggest thing that I miss about, football or organized sports in general is the locker room atmosphere. Is that, there's nothing better than going into the locker room, talking shit with your boys, and knowing 100% knowing that none of that shit gets. And I'm not sitting here saying we're fucking out there just acting a complete fool and talking out of our ass on everything, but like, for a fact that whatever is said in that locker room, whatever is done in that locker room, there's been a couple times in the locker room where like it did transition over from the practice field to the locker room. I won't name names in that one either, but that was probably one of the goodest fights I've ever seen, to be quite honest with you. I'm talking like it was, fucking Tyson Holyfield, type shit. And people, I mean, I ain't gonna lie to you, I thought I saw a couple dudes start pulling out ones in their hand, like, hey, let's go, I got 5 right here, type shit. But it's like, and that's the shit, like, you can't do that, in a parking lot. You can't do that, like you're saying with regular jobs, because you can only do that in that sacred place inside a locker room. And so, it's unfortunate, that they're having to go through that. And it's unfortunate that it got leaked to where, now public perception is going to be making, ultimately the decision here of who we going to keep or who we going to pay more. And so obviously once that decision comes out, it's going to lead to more, turmoil or more division. And so they're at the end of the day, unless Draymond literally looks back and, whatever happens, I just don't see Draymond being that kind of guy. Again, I don't know shit about basketball, but I just don't, knowing of how he plays and how he is, I just don't see that being a thing to where he's like, I'm just going to let this go type shit.
Well, it's unfortunate because it's now, public knowledge, and because everybody's going to talk about it. Like now, whenever the contract stuff happens, the story's not going to be about, well, they're trying to invest in their younger talent. The story is going to be about like what that incident, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what makes it unfortunate. And to your point, the camaraderie that's built in the locker room is, it's different. I mean, you can speak to it too. You've won state titles, with basketball and in a locker room.
Even though it's a lower level for high school, I mean, still you're competitive. It's a high level, right? You're still, like I said, it's family.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there's stuff that you don't go home from practice.
I mean, hell, you and I played pickup and damn near came to blows several times because I know how to hurt you, right? Like I know what's going to.
Speaking of which,
like you can't go left.
You know what to say.
You can't go left.
Building camaraderie in the locker room. Did you guys ever like? I learned how to shoot dice in the locker room.
Was
there ever like any side games or anything like y'all would play, especially when you go on the road and you get that per diem money?
Oh God, I don't even know if I can.
Dude, we used to play flip, dude. You ever play flip?
What's flip?
So we would literally get our $15, our per diems. Like, so we get $15 no matter if it was a home game or away game, because we'd end up using it. Because Coach Stoops, like I was telling some guys the other day on the golf course, Coach Stoops is always so appreciative of our time, of throughout the week, of off the field stuff. And one of the coolest things that he always did was every Friday night, if it wasn't a noon game, he would always take us to a movie. Mm-hmm. Like we would rent out one of the theaters, home or away, and we would go watch a movie. And I was always looking forward to football season because I knew that I'd be watching some damn good new movies and I wouldn't have to, pay my own dime to go watch it. And there's actually a couple times like I didn't agree with the movie we were watching. So I'd tell Buff upstairs, like, hey, Buff, I'm going to slip out of here about 10 minutes. I know that other movie's showing. Could you make sure I get over there and, blend in with the crowd?
That's amazing.
I got you, bro. But anyways, so we would get that $15 and we would usually spend it on like, candy or, drinks or whatever it was at the movie theater. But literally, dudes would get this $15, find a quarter, and would be placing bets on heads and tails.
That's amazing.
It was, I know one guy, so we went down to the bowl game, and we got more than $15, obviously. Dude came up thousands.
Really?
Not like tens of thousands, but came up thousands. That's on funny. That stuff. And it was hilarious, man, because that only gets to happen inside a locker room.
We had a big year-long Mario Kart binge where we'd play on the road.
Okay.
Like somebody would bring an N64 and we'd go to somebody's hotel room and play Mario Kart. But again, that's stuff that like you don't do really outside of that.
No, you're not doing that at like an accounting expo at the Hilton Gardens.
Yeah. Well, you're a bunch of college age kids that, have your own interests and things that, when you're on the road, you're stuck in a hotel, right? But you're going through these experiences, these 5 a.m. workouts and and trying to go to class and dealing with, girl issues and dealing with your family and all of those things that the whole group of you is going through together at the same time, right? That, you don't get that time back. Like, just on a tangent real quick, my sister got the opportunity. She plays soccer at Eastern Kentucky.
So she had her senior day the other day.
She did.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But she had the opportunity to take a COVID year, and she was like,
God, I'd kill for COVID.
She was like, I've played soccer for my entire life. I'm ready to start making some money. And she was like, what's your opinion? I was like, without a doubt,
stay
play
as long as you can.
Because the second that it's gone, you won't realize how much you appreciated those little moments, the treatment, the workouts, all of it. So take advantage of it, enjoy it. And, kind of bringing things full circle here. Again, that punch, those two would get over it if it wasn't for all the chatter that's going to go on outside of it now.
Oh, yeah, because they're going to have so many people that
and that's what
be in their ear. And, it depends on, who they're surrounding themselves with, of, what message they're going to be talked to in that context.
That's what bothers me.
So we'll see how it plays out. But speaking of family, like you're talking about with Zach, let's go ahead and wrap it up with our weekly briefly talks about the family of the Targaryens and everybody over in Westeros and the Game of Thrones. So what do we think about this week's episode, boys?
Yeah, I'll be fairly short with this one because I'm anxious to see what's going to happen next week, and then we can really delve in before the finale for this season. But it's they had a very similar locker room moment at that dinner.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? Where they're all like, I'm sick of this shit. You apologize to him. You apologize to him. Y'all make it work, right? So the last thing King Viserys is going to see was his family getting along before he left, and they didn't get along again. But I'll leave it with when the time comes that Daemon and the guy that got his eye cut open, Aegon. No, Aegon's the older brother, I think. I can't remember.
Whichever one got his eye.
Yeah, whichever one got his eye cut open. When those two ultimately have their battle that's going to happen,
awesome.
it will be Battle of the Bastards-esque.
Epic.
I don't think it's going to be as good as the Mountain versus the Hound, because that was one of the biggest anticipation fights that everybody wanted to see in the original Game of Thrones series. But I do agree. And like we were talking about, it seems like that guy he's the younger brother, but he looks like he's 10 years older than the actual older brother. I don't know if they got him on HGH or, if they pulled some blood from the dragon and make him, grow, 6 inches taller and, look 5 to 10 years older than his actual older brother. But, that's a bad son of a bitch right there, man. I mean, the way I saw him out there in the yard working with those swords and shit, dude, I'm telling you. Especially because he's got the biggest dragon in the kingdom, too.
Yeah.
So. But anyways.
I agree. I mean, I'm just ready.
You concur?
I concur.
Here we go. Locker room talk. NFL football, Monday Night Football, college football. Can't thank Connor O'Gara again for coming on here with us. We'll see you guys next week. This has been Fully Unscripted.